Okay guys, so today I'm going to be doing a deck doctor video. This is from the Discord. Speaking of which, if you're interested in talking about the decks you're building, getting feedback, talking about different variations of White Forest, or doing deck doctor, and also, I've said this before, but I actually do want to host a tournament for Rail this time, which is probably going to be like a White Forest centric tournament. So if you're interested in that, or you just want to join the Discord, you can click the link in the description. Okay, so let's move on to the first submission. I want to talk a little bit about deck theory and ratios throughout this, and if anyone has uploaded a Centurion list, I'm going to cover some of the stuff that came up in my last video, because it was one of the first videos where I had a lot of people disagreeing with choices that I made, and so if that comes up in any of the Deck Doctor submissions, I will go over it. Okay, so the first submission doesn't have any comments or questions, so just having a look here. First of all, this may sound very obvious. If a card is at 3, it means you want to draw it. If it is not at 3, it means you don't want to draw it. There are exceptions to this. For example, there could be non-engine ratios where you just want things that are searchable off of like a thrust. For example, an Ultimate Slayer, which you see at 1 here in the main and at 2 in the side. Or you could have stuff like your non-engine ratios where you just want a certain number of non-engine cards and they are effectively equivalent, and so you just want to reach that number. If you look at the normals here, you have 3 Stellar and 2 Sylvie puts you at 5, which is the breakpoint, I believe, if I remember correctly, after which the chance of drawing double normals increases more than the chance of opening a single normal increases. But I feel like in White Forest, you need to open one of your normals for sure. And if you were in Supreme Darkness format, you would have the advantage of Azamina Elzet making your normals less dead because you can special like a Sylvie from hand after you bricked on something else. But this is crossover rakers, obviously. So I guess this is like a fine number of normals. The main issue that I have with the engine here, this is a ratio that I've seen in the OCG quite a lot, is there's 1 engraver on 1 lacrima with no target. So there's no like tracked or sanked for the engraver. And what that means is, in a world where you don't open engraver or lacrima, your closed heaven line is very, very efficient. Because you closed heaven into Requiem, Requiem brings out the Lacrima, Lacrima dumps the engraver, and now you have a lot of resources for, like a Requiem play and Desiree. But the problem is that if you draw the engraver, it's a brick because it has no search target, and if you draw the Lacrima, it bricks your normal. I mean, assuming that you were going to use your normal on something like a Sylvie or an Stellar, you don't actually want to draw the Lacrima. So, I feel like you either make the decision to play a larger Fiendsmith engine, in which case if you insist on playing Desiree and Sequence, which is fine, I'm not saying that like you're not allowed to do that. I think you probably play Tract and Lurie, but if you're going to be on the Caesar package, then I think you can get away with playing Sanct, which is great because you don't have to play Lurie for the Tract, and that means there's 1 less bricked normal summon in your deck. Because the single Sanct can go into the Requiem to get the Lacrima and dump the engraver, etc. So I would just be wary of that, because you already have Hallowed Azamina as like a, in quotes, necessary brick, but then you're deciding to play Debtors, which is much better if you know you're going first for sure and you're setting up a board where you're going to sol out of turn. But you're adding a bunch of cards into your deck that are likely to do nothing going second, like Hallowed, like Debtors, like the Engraver and the Lacrima. So I feel like that's a kind of a risky number of bricks to have once you're like already at 4. And then don't forget that you have cards like Deception that trade very unfavorably into Ryziel right now because of Detonator. I will just like lastly mention, because I don't want to spend too long on every single profile or this will be a very long video, the GOAT is something that you could maybe consider at 3 because you're already playing Droplet and you have a deck that has lots of discards, and this against Detonator is extremely strong. It's also very strong against a card like White Binder, or whatever else you think Malice is about to bring out. So I probably would, like, one thing you could do is you could cut the Lacrima, play just 1 engraver and switch to a Caesar to be stronger into Nib in what's probably going to be a Nib heavy format where Desiree is not as useful. You don't have to do that. I'm just suggesting if you were to switch to Caesar, you could do that. Take out the Debtors, so you would be removing 2 bricks, the Lacrima and the Debtors. I'm talking about like going second bricks especially, although this is like a going first brick too because it breaks your normal. And maybe you'd also fit in like a third GOAT here. So but otherwise, I think this looks like decent. If you're playing the Ultimate Slayer, contributing to your power spell ratio here and having 2 in the side, that seems fine because you're not overcommitting to going first. or going second rather. I don't really like the counter trap. It feels like it's a little bit too resource intensive and you can't search it off with thrust because it's a counter trap. I also don't really like different dimension ground in this deck because it turns off a lot of the stuff that you want to do. I feel like I'd rather play like a Daruma or something, but you know, there really isn't as good of a thrust target for lots of other decks if D-Barrier doesn't hit them. So that's my general take on the first one. For the next one, it's my list for trying the new lines and cards. Happy with it, but maybe you have some advice for me. Okay. So this one is Supreme Darkness format. Okay, what's the first thing to look at? Let's start with some of the engine ratios. So we have 2 Witch, we have 2 Deception, 3 Wanted, and 2 Tails. What is the reason for this? Is a kind of like an unusual set of ratios. So I'm just trying to at a glance figure out if there's a reason for splitting it this way. I think that Deception, if you were expecting a lot of Ryziel, is probably not a great card to draw. It's probably something you would rather search in your combo after having dealt with the detonator, for example, by imperming it at the start of your turn, or like if you were playing Black Goat by goating it, or making your talents live so you could take the detonator. Or, you know, like if you have like weird combinations of cards like a called by, you could force the detonator to pop itself. If you go like talents to take, detonator pops itself, and then when they try to bring it back with plug-in, you could call by the detonator. There are like lots of different things you could do that would make Deception much easier to resolve later into your turn. So I personally don't really like this card at more than 1. I think it's only really, you kind of have to play it because it goes so well with the Azamina stuff and the Sinful Spoil stuff that you're all playing. You basically have to play because of Azet. So I would probably play this at 1. I think that you could play more than 1 Tails if you're on like a super heavy spellcaster engine where like almost all hands you're going to have, for example, like a Witch. I feel like you probably would want to be on 3 Witch though if you were playing multiple Tails. Feels like slightly risky where you could have like draw Tails that's not live. Let's look at the White Forest ratios too. So we have 3 LZ, 2 Azet, 2 Astellar, and 3 Sylvie. So I don't really like Astellar anymore if you're not playing the toy cards because it's a lot riskier into any type of low impact interruption. Like if you get impermed or veilered on this card, and you haven't sent a soldier that's going to bring itself back for you to continue comboing, then the card can just be nothing and use your entire normal. And then the thing is that it's not like normal summoning Sylvie, it gets impermed, and then you just bring out the Azet anyhow as your extender, and then you just full combo. Because if you bring the Azet out, you have a 2 and a 2, and they're not even like, it's not even like one of them is a tuner. So you'd have to have like a 3-card combo in hand where you had like a Stellar, it gets impermed, then you Azet bring out something else like a Sylvie, so that's the 3rd card in the 3-card combo, and that's just like not super realistic. So I actually heavily dislike a Stellar in Supreme Darkness format, but I know that's a controversial take and a lot of people disagree with that. But in terms of your normals, I feel like it kind of does make sense that you'd prioritize the Sylvie over the Stellar because it's probably a better normal with the Azet. But if I'm just looking at this at a glance, I would for sure play a 3rd Azet over the 2nd Deception. I feel like that will unbrick your hands more often and give you more playable hands and like useful bodies that actually get onto the board without you having to resolve a bunch of stuff first. Yeah, the other thing was the same comment as before. The 1 Engraver, 1 Lacrima. I really dislike that ratio. You can play it. You are adding like more bricks into your deck, but you know, if you really value the Desiree that much, which I think is probably worse than the Caesar, but it you know, it's like better I guess in a breaker meta, but the Caesar is just so good at playing around Nib, and it still forces them to do something. Like if they have an Eclipse, they may have to Eclipse very early, and you still have your Unleashing, maybe you have like Woes, whatever it is that you still have stuff that you can use. So that's my thoughts on that. Okay, next one is this one. So this is also Supreme Darkness format because we have an Azet in here. Here we have a triple Engraver, 1 Lacrima, double tracked. So I assume there's a Lurie in here. Yeah, okay, so here's the Lurie. So I assume that means he's playing Sequence Desiree, right? Okay, so here's the Sequence Desiree. And how many normals do we have in here? So 3 Sylvie, 1 Stellar is 4. The Lurie is 5. And the Lacrima is 6. I think that's actually fine in terms of your number of normals. Although, I feel like your White Forest count is quite low. This is maybe a good place to bring up the probability calculator. So you have 3, 6, 7, 8, 9 monsters. So if you, let's say you're going first and you have 9 White Forest monsters, the chance of you opening a minimum of one of these is 74%. So the vast majority of the time. But you typically need multiple cards to be able to play. Unless you have like a Sylvie that can Sylvie search, Tails search, whatever. But if you have like an LZ, you need another card to send off of it. Or if you have a better example with just the monsters is an Azet, you need to have another monster to be able to actually go into a synchro play. So I feel like this is a low number of monsters. If you want to open at least 2 of them, the chance of that is only 31%. So it's just under like a third of the time you're going to see a minimum of 2 White Forest cards. Let's say hypothetically that you were to add in 2 more Azets. So that 9 went to 10, 11. That would go up to a 42% chance. So it's just over like a 10% increase there. I think that's certainly worth pursuing, like that additional 10, 11% increase just by having in 2 more Azets. I would, even if you didn't want to take anything else out here, I would happily go up to 42 if it meant that I was going to be more consistent in the main with a card that does not help, it does not contribute to bricking your normal, and it works well with the rest of your engine. So 3 Wanted, 3 Witch, I guess you could play 2 Tails. I don't really like playing 2 Tails. You could even take out a Tails and add in like a second Rusia or a second Stellar. So I don't know. I feel like you're on mostly low impact hand traps, I guess, besides the Fulos, but it feels a little bit risky to be so light on the engine. Because if you open, like, let's say you open the Wanted engine and the Fiendsmith stuff, you're basically playing Deception Resolves, or you're only on Fiendsmith engine for the entire game, and then your deck is way worse than the actual Fiendsmith deck, which is on like 21 hand traps or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. My main comment here is I just think that you're a little bit too light on the engine count. Okay. So this next one is crossover breakers format, I believe. So let's first of all look at the Fiendsmith ratios. Engraver and nothing else, which means what are we playing? Caesar here. So yeah, Closed Heaven, Requiem, Caesar, Necroquip. Okay. Let's look at the toy ratios. So triple box, double soldier, and 1 tank. 43 cards, so I guess you don't want to add in a third soldier. Although if you're on the triple witch, triple wanted, I feel like the soldier is probably more value than maining a debtors. You could, debtors is something that's very easy to fit into your siding patterns, because if you're maining 3 Fulos, the 3 Fulos are obviously always going to come out when you go first, unless you're on the gimmicky, the Goatee of the Deep Beyond combo, where you get rid of your own field so that you can make the Fulos live. But I feel like the Debtors is like a very easy card to come out for the third soldier, just because it's not as reliable, or the Scourge, because the Scourge is another card where if you go second, it doesn't actually do anything unless you're already getting to the point where you can make a synchro, in which case it's like the definition of a win more card. If you want to play 3 Deception, that's your call. I guess you just have to be careful about the detonator stuff. You are on, let's see, 3 Ash, 4 Valor, 5, 6 Nibs, 7, 8, 9 Fulos, 10, 11, 12 Imperm. So the issue with these ratios, if you're on 12 hand traps, you're going to see at least one of them almost every single game, 85% of the time, 2 of them about half of the time, and then 3 of them only 14% of the time. So I guess, like, you're either drawing 1 or 2 hand traps, and that's what I feel like is kind of the danger zone for right now, because your engine has to be really good at pushing through stuff if you're only going to draw 2 hand traps half the time, and then the rest of the time you're basically just drawing 1 hand trap, like in terms of your statistically normal hands. So that's what drives most of my profiles and like some of the other people that build White Forest into playing just power spells or other types of breakers. Fulos is a bit of an exception in that it is so high impact that it's kind of like a power spell in theory. That one card gives you so much value that you might as well play it. So you could count Fulos as like a high impact card, but the stuff like the Valor Nib, I guess, is debatably higher impact. Just depends on how your opponent is playing. But the Ash Blossom, the Imperm, like those cards are a lot lower impact. So I feel like this is very risky in terms of the non-engine that's in here. And then if you only draw like 1 hand trap, which is going to be half the time or so, it's not like you've maxed out on all of your engine pieces to be able to for sure play through stuff. Like, you don't have the third soldier, just as a random example. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like with these ratios, you either have to play more hand traps, like maybe 3-ish more hand traps, and just accept that you're not on a huge number of engine cards, or you just go straight to power spell and you get rid of like the Ash. I guess if you really want the Valor Nib to search for the combo. Wait, is there a Gallant Granite in here? No, there's not. So I could understand Nib in a Nib format where you're playing against a lot of Malice, but I don't know. These other cards I feel like could be power spells. If you're combining hand traps and power spells, maybe keep in like the Fulos and the Nib as a super high impact stuff, and then just have the rest of them be power spells, like, I don't know, like Eclipse or Talon's Thrust, that type of stuff. That's my main comment there. Okay, so now this one. So there are 3 bills experimenting with. Okay, so let's look at the first one. So this one is Supreme Darkness, obviously. There's 1 Azamina LZ. We have 3 Sylvie, which I like. There's 1 Esteller, which I think is fine. And 1 Rusia. Let's see. So 1 Tails. There's 1 Sinful Spoils of the White Forest. There's Unleashing and No Woes. The 1 Engraver, 1 Lacrima. I covered that before, so I won't go over it again. I don't personally like this. I think in... So let's count the number of cards that you don't want to draw going second. So there is Hallowed Azamina, there's Unleashing, you could maybe count this as well. Sinful Spoils of the White Forest, that's 3 cards. 4 Engraver because it doesn't search anything, and 5 Lacrima. So if you look at the number of cards that you don't want to draw going second, if you have 5 of them and your hand size is 6 because you're going second, just over half the time you are going to draw at least one of those cards, and only 15% of the time you'll draw 2 bricks. So, I mean, this is, I guess, kind of like the like absolute limit for what I would consider how many of these bad going second cards you should have in your deck is, and you will have some games where you draw 2 of them, and then those are basically like unplayable hands in modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! Because if you're going against like a Tenpai deck, I mean not a Tenpai, sorry, like a Ryzeal deck, and let's say you drew like a Ash Valor or like a Ash Imperm, okay? If their hand was really bad, you may be fine. If you've drawn 2 bricks, like let's say you draw like an Engraver and like a Unleashing, okay? The other 3 cards in your hand, or the other 4 cards in your hand, have to be very, very good to play through even just like a single detonator. So, I don't know, I think that's a little bit risky, but let's look at the non-engine real quick. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hand traps. Then it's 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I don't dislike this, although I feel like you should probably just play the 3rd Nib, because, for example, if the Ryzeal player just makes Detonator and passes, then that's fine. If they have made a larger board, you're going to want to use Nib. If you're playing Malice, you're going to want to use Nib regardless. With Ryzeal, it's a lot harder to interact with them, I guess, if they set up the cross and then they just negate the Nib with the cross. But if you're playing like a lot of hand traps, I think you probably would want to play 3 Nib. I also feel like Droll is quite good, so I play 3 Droll right now, but I don't know, I think that one is more debatable. But the Valor, I don't feel like the 2nd Valor is worth it over the 3rd Nib, especially because you can already search one of the Valors. And then the Chorozo is obviously not confirmed. I personally don't like this card, though. I feel like it's a bit convoluted to get to the searches off of it, so I don't play it. I don't really have much else to say about this one. I think I'd probably just play 1 Engraver in the main, and that's like the main change I would make to this deck. Okay, so the second one is Cash T Reversion. This is something that I've wanted to play for a while, and maybe it's a good thing this has come up, because there are some decks or archetypes that seem to have like a lot of synergy with White Forest. Like if you activate a Pressured Planet and you search whatever, then this is a free send off of any of your White Forest stuff, and that's great because it's a free resource that has already searched something. It's not just like a dead card or a brick you're getting rid of. But the Kashtira cards don't really help you advance the game plan with the White Forest stuff. It's not like Centurion where you can synchro into the same things or different things, and the engines are more or less complementary. Because the Kashtira stuff is like, okay, you could play Psychic and Punisher, which is like a cool addition to the deck, but they don't actually help you with the problems that you have. Like if you get ashed on LZ, it's not like you can just Centurion combo anyhow, or you could like Primera and Azet into an Arciela. You know, like how those things combine together. These don't actually help you do that. So I have personally stayed away from this, and I feel like you would play the Kashtira stuff if you think that Unicorn specifically or Fenrir specifically is a good meta call, but not as like a way to combine the engine. So I, in principle, don't like this combination, aside from, like I said, if you really think that Fenrir or Unicorn is a way to interact better with your opponent's decks. And then there's the same one Engraver, one Lacrima that I dislike here. So that's really what I would say about that. And then the third one here is heavier on the Kashtira stuff, but also has in Debtors. So let's count the going second bricks. There's Birth, Debtors, Hallowed. I think this is Hamartia. I don't know if that name changed. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4. I guess that's tolerable, but I mean, to me, that's I don't know. I feel like being on 2 bricks is already kind of pushing it, because actually, let me just pull this up again. So let's say that you were on 2 bricks, and it's only 28% of the chance that you see at least one of those, which is a very big difference from if you're playing like 5 bricks, and then it's much more of the time. So I don't know. I don't think I would be playing Debtors if you have to play Hallowed, so I wouldn't main the Debtors. I'd probably side that for going first. And then I guess this is just your search target instead of like a Woes or Unleashing, so I don't really have a comment on that. 2 Shangri-Ira seems kind of crazy, though. I don't know how often you're actually going to go into both of these. I feel like I might even rather a second Big Eye if we weren't going for like a different type of rank 7. But the Dark Arm Dragon rank 7, I think, is probably just as better to have more utility in here if you are going for the rank 7 type stuff. So I'd probably change one of these for the Dark Armed rank 7. Mo Regina is cool, and it does work if you have a plan for your resource game, but I think you have to be careful about how realistic it is for you to actually summon that card. Okay, we have we still have a bunch more left. Okay, I'm gonna speed up then. Okay, so this one, 3 Astellar, 2 Sylvie, 1 Rusia, and then we have the large wanted engine with 2 Soldier, not 3. There's 1 Veiler to search. There's the Hamartia here again, and Woes, and then we have Engraver and Lacrima. So again, I do not like this combination of cards, and if you're playing 1 search target in the Hamartia and then another one in the Woes, I think that really is pushing it, and that's just not acceptable. I think like the bare minimum at this point, you have to choose to play like just 1 Engraver in the main, cut the Lacrima, because you're already going for Caesar. It's not even like you're going for Desiree. There's really no reason to play the Lacrima if you are not even trying to go for the Desiree plays. So that can easily come out, and then that puts you on what, like Engraver is 1, Woes, Hamartia 2, 3, 4 on Hallowed. Just 4, which is still a lot of bricks for going second. I would cut one of these, and I think Woes is better than Hamartia. So yeah, I'll probably cut this and cut the Lacrima, and I think the rest of this looks pretty decent. I don't think I would combine the imperms with the other high impact stuff. I'd probably put in you don't have space for super poly, but like an Eclipse or maybe thrusts or something for instead of the imperms. Okay, so now let's go into this one. This is Crossover Breakers, and oh wait, does he say something? Crossover Breakers list without toys that tries to abuse breakers and Foolos. Okay, so the breakers are Goat, Evenly, Droplet, Thrust Talents, an Ultimate Slayer, and then there's the 3 Foolos. I feel like that's a solid amount of breakers to be playing. Debtors, again, I feel like you're playing a deck that has to play Hallowed, and it basically has to play a search target as a trap, and that's like, to me, is kind of like the maximum of what you want to go up to, where if you have 2, it's still a decent like amount of the time you're going to open one of those cards. And so I don't know, like, I mean, if you're going first, it's 23% of the time, which is it's a little bit lower than 28% of the time, but I feel like you shouldn't add in other cards that are bricks going second unless you absolutely have to, or they really, really complement the rest of your engine. And that's ignoring that when you go first, you have like 3 Evenly, 1 Ultimate Slayer that can't do anything. Ultimate Slayer could unbrick itself later on. Evenly Match is unlikely to unbrick itself later on. So the number of bricks that you have in game 1 depends on the dice roll, and that's kind of like a risky situation to put yourself in. I do understand, like, if you really value the evenly and you're like, okay, they're not going to have trap negates, this will be like a strong card to resolve, that you could just like agree, you know, okay, based on my breakers or power spell ratio, I'm going to put that in. But then you really shouldn't be also hurting yourself for when you go second with, you know, Woes and Hallowed, which is, you know, undesirable to have to draw these going second, but also the Debtors. But otherwise, I think this looks decent. And do I have anything to say about this? No, not really. Okay. So now this is Supreme Darkness. So we have Engraver and Lacrima again with no Engraver target, which I don't like. There is a single Goat, which I guess you can search off of Thrust, so it's still worth playing at 1 because it is searchable. I feel like Droplet is better the more good targets to send there are. So like sending stuff like a Tails that you're activating and chaining droplets to, or like a Wanted or whatever, those are very solid, or like a Hallowed Azamina. Those types of cards are good, but then I feel like you should commit a little bit more to it. And you know, Imperm is one of the non-engine cards that, even though it's not high impact, it does work with droplets, but Ash doesn't, because you'd be losing the Ash and be a card down by the time you go to droplet, or you're not using the Ash so that you have something else to send off of droplet. So these don't work together. I'd probably cut like 2 Ash for 2 more Goat, and then the third Ash might be like another Talents or a different type of thrust target. In terms of the rest of the deck, though, I feel like I like that there's one Deception. I like Unleashing a lot. The Sinful Spoils of the White Forest, I don't know what I think about this card yet. Also playing Chorozo, which we don't know when it's coming. Moa Regina, I think you could play in a deck that heavily focuses on the Azamina stuff and is very, very good on the crackback, but not like consistently going to be useful. The I don't know what I think about the Q bow or A bow or whatever. I forget what this card is called. I haven't decided what I think about that yet, but I think the rest of this looks solid to me. Okay, so now we have we still have a few more. Okay, so this one is post Supreme Darkness. It has in Queen of the Azamina, and which can actually, there are some like kind of cool lines with this for like making Chaos Angel and stuff, but it has the same kind of issue of where like, here's the Woes, here's the Hallowed, so you're at 2 bricks now, but there's also now an Azaroon, and there's also an Unleashing, and there's also a Scourge, and there's also a Sinful Spoils of the White Forest. So if you were to play Queen of the Azamina, I feel like the rest of your list has to be so absolutely clean that you don't really mind that you're drawing this. Because this card, it's not that it's guaranteed to be a brick, but there are many hands that it doesn't work with. So you have to be very careful about this. Like, this is something that you might want to have in your hand or search to be able to fuse off, for example. But I think there are too many other cards that are simply not good going second in this deck. So like Debtors and Azaroon would for sure come out, at least, probably the Scourge as well. And then you would be on the Unleashing, Hallowed, and Woes would be 3, which is pushing it. And then you're still playing the Queen, which is 4. If you really want to play that because you think it's important to your build, okay. But I don't think you should be playing the Scourge and the Debtors and the Azaroon. That's like an easy 3 cards to take out. So, okay. 3 more. So this one is looking like a Runic version. So let's see. We have the triple Evenly, which, you know, in Runic, there's so little space for your non-engine that, you know, playing these types of super high impact cards that do nothing going first is understandable. Goat, though, I feel like White Forest Runic is one of the few builds where 3 Goat maybe should be mandatory, because it's not just the LZ, which you have at 2, by the way, which is kind of crazy. It's not just the LZ that can get this into the grave before you even have a monster on field. You can get this in grave as early as your draw phase. When you like draw, then you Runic spell to bring out Hugin, and Hugin pitches the Goat. And then, you know, you can immediately turn off their detonator or whatever else you want. So I feel like you should be playing 3 Goat in this version of the deck, especially if you're also on Thrust. You have... I feel like playing Scourge is kind of risky in this version because you have so little space for non-engine. I would probably play a 2nd Goat over the Scourge and a 3rd Goat over Foolish Burial Goods. And like the rest of these ratios, the thing about LZ is that it obviously loses hard to Ash and to Droll, but your deck already loses to Droll. So it's like, would you rather the normal summon Rusia or Sylvie, or LZ and search one of those? I feel like I'd probably rather the LZ to search one of these. So I'd probably play like 3 LZ and 2 Rusia or 2 Sylvie. So yeah, otherwise seems fine to me. Okay, last two, I think. Did he say anything? This is mostly your list, but curious what you think of the side. So in the main, we have 3 Stellar, 3 LZ, 2 Rusia, sorry, 1 Rusia, 2 Sylvie. There's 1 Engraver. This looks like a super standard type of list that plays the barrier as the main deck thrust target, which is, you know, that's when you're like suffering against the meta and you really need that and you accept that it's a brick going second. So you have the Azirune and the D barrier and the Woes as bricks going second, and the Engraver. So that's like super pushing it because you also have Hallowed here. I've actually started to think that maybe you don't main deck the Azirune just like for this exact reason, because you have like too many cards you don't want to open going second if you are committing to the thrust D barrier thing. But anyhow, this is just like a basic list if you're including the toy engine, and I think this like works, you know, as it did before. But then there's also this part of the deck. So it's with the Caesar stuff, which is fine. Deck lockdown. I'm actually not sure what I think about deck lockdown. I haven't tested it much in White Forest. I've mostly just played it in pure Centurion. The Dogwood I feel like actually could be decent again, because if you're stopped and you just want to not die, then you can Dogwood and live another turn. The only issue with Dogwood in the White Forest deck is it's not like you can draw like a top deck where you can like just OTK and immediately end the game or immediately build your board back up. If your resources were completely diminished in your turn and then, or your opponent's turn, and then you Dogwood to live, you still need to have like multiple cards to play usually. So I feel like Dogwood is kind of risky because it might work in that it gives you another turn to live, which is why it entered the meta like a couple formats ago. But I don't know if White Forest is the deck to take advantage of that extra turn. So I don't know. Maybe this would be like 3 Nibs going into Malice or something like that. Yeah, I'm not sure about the Dogwood, but Eradicator, I think that could work. So I think that is everything. Yeah, okay. So thanks for everyone that submitted stuff. And how long was that? 32 minutes. Okay, I'm going to finish. So thanks for watching. If you have any recommendations, let me know. And see you in the next video.